Funding for this program is brought to you in part by Crowning Touch Senior Moving Services.
Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. Hi, everyone. I'm Rose Martin, and this is Real Life with our favorite life coach, Susan Harf. And today in Real Life, she's going to be sharing tips and strategies to help us navigate those things that we sometimes get in our way or we find some trouble with. Like you, I can't wait to hear what's on her mind today. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Rose. I'm happy to see you, and I'm absolutely happy to see you, too. So here's what we're talking about today. Long-term monogamous marriage is not the same thing as a short-term relationship. And we're here to talk today about how to make it good, how to make it great.
And how to keep it alive. So first of all, what is long-term?
Long-term,
Like
unlike some teenagers believe, long-term is decades. It's when you make a decision and you stay with the marriage forever. Or you're in a long-term marriage for, let's say, at least 10 years. That's what I'm talking about. Because sometimes you make that decision, but it doesn't last. So we're not going to judge that today. But what we're talking about is long-term relationships where you are with someone over not only a long period of time, but through life's ebbs and flows and the various seasons of life. So possibly having children, possibly through the death of parents, possibly through job changes, all of those kinds of things that happen in the course of people's lives.
Well, and that's everything, right? From sickness to job change to moving.
That's right.
All kinds of things that you have to deal with.
Yes.
Long-term.
Exactly.
Marriage. Well, I can't wait to hear, Susan, how to keep the love alive and how to keep things exciting.
So what we're going to start out mentioning here, and I've mentioned it before on this program, but it bears mentioning again, and that is why you chose the person. And I'm going to tell you a secret, because I love secrets, and I love to tell Rose secrets, and here's the secret.
Okay.
You didn't marry him for his blue eyes.
I didn't.
No,
Darn.
no. We think that we marry somebody because we like their approach, we like how they treated us, we the kinds of things that we're able to ascertain in a short amount of time. That's not why we chose them. And the reason we chose them is kind of surprising. We all grew up in a family to learn how to be a human being. That was our teacher, that was our school that we went to learn how to be human, called the family of origin. And none of us went to Harvard, meaning none of us had a perfect family that did everything completely functionally. We all had some dysfunction in our families. That's the way families are. So while we were growing up, we learned all kinds of patterns, and some were functional, some were not. And the things that kind of were things that we had to get over, things that were a hump, things that made us sort of unsteady, those are the things that we're still trying to work out in our adulthood. And the way we work them out, what better way to work them out when we want to continue to work on those things? And believe me, this is not conscious, this is unconscious. But we want to continue to play out those scenarios in the family that we create for ourselves called our marriage. And we pick someone, we select somebody who we believe unconsciously can best help us do that. So,
but sometimes that's frustrating, when you think about those characteristics of your partner, and you're thinking, I don't think I would have picked that right now. I really don't think I would have picked for you to have those types of attitudes or be the total opposite of everything that I think would be much easier.
Exactly. Or that I was trying to run away from, or that I really told myself that I didn't want.
Right.
Okay. So it's not a bad thing. The good news of the secret is that it's not a terrible thing if, for instance, one of your parents was a little aggressive or dictatorial or a little stubborn. It's not a terrible thing if your spouse is stubborn. And I want to mention also here that sometimes it doesn't look like the family of origin. Sometimes it looks like the person is the opposite of your parents. But when we dig deeper, we find out, well, there are some residual kinds of feelings that we have about the family of origin with our spouse. So I'm going to give you an example of that. Let's say your father was an alcoholic, and let's say he wasn't home a lot. And you married somebody who was steady, stride, and true, with the family, loving parent, loving husband, not like your father. However, he works so hard that he's gone a lot. Sometimes that person comes to me as a coach and says, I love my husband, but I feel kind of well, they're not able to use the word abandoned at that point, but what they're describing is abandonment. I feel lonely. I wish I was with him more. He's nothing like my father. I want to be with him more, but I don't see him a lot. So the feelings of being abandoned or left out or left might be the same with somebody who's wonderful, loving, sweet, as the feelings that you had as a child having your father never home because he was in the bar. Not the same reason, but the same feeling. Okay. So that's the secret. We married the person to continue to kind of work out those issues. As we're working them out, they sometimes can cause some frustration. The exciting part is when you can work that out with your spouse, or as you try and work those things out, it becomes healing. And that is how we heal. And so sometimes people say to me, well, what if I work it all out? Do I not want him anymore? No, because you also married him because he had great blue eyes, and you also married him because he was kind to you, and you also married him because he was a steady provider. All the things that you thought you wanted are still there.
You know, Bob and I always talk about that sometimes we're the yin and yang, that
Sure.
we're so very different.
Yeah.
The things that he's really good at, I'm not. And the things that I tend to gravitate towards, he's like pulled along to say, okay, yeah, I'll go with you on this. So that's true. It's a balance, right? And maybe that's what we were both looking for.
Absolutely. And yes, and in the context of long-term marriage, sometimes our differences trip us up, but many times, as you're saying, we complement each other and we need each other for those things, which brings me to point number 2, and that is, remember why you're there. In a long-term marriage, remember as much as you can why you chose this person and why it's a decision to continue to stay. And that includes knowing that when you first met, there's lust involved. And as you go through the decades, there may not be that same lust, and that does not mean that you're not attracted to each other. It doesn't mean that you don't want each other. It just means that you're not 16 years old. So we need to find ways then to show how much we love each other, and they need to be deliberate. They need to be, okay, we're going to make a date on Wednesday nights, and we're not going to go to the movies on Saturday night and call that date night. That we're not really interacting, but we're going to sit maybe even in our own kitchen or dining room and look at each other without the children or without anybody else present and say, how are you this week? What's going on with you? Because the truth is that in our day-to-day lives, we get so busy. People are just so busy now doing everything that they're doing. I find this to be true with my adult children. You know, they're in their 30s, they're raising children. They're so busy, and it stays busy for many, many, many years. And regardless of whether kids are there or not, we're very busy right now. We just finished a move, as you know, and we're just on the go. So it's very important that on an ongoing basis, you meet each other where you are and you say, how are you? What's going on with you today? And then the other thing that's important along those lines is people say to me sometimes that as they get older and things happen like, well, one of you snores or one of you has an issue with getting up at night a lot, sometimes people say, well, we're not going to sleep in the same bed because we don't want to interrupt each other. And I'm against that. I'm not for that. I believe that if at all possible, you need to stay in the same bed because touch is important. Feeling close is important physically, not just emotionally. And one relies on the other. So for instance, you know, when I see couples in their 90s walking on the pier at the beach and they're holding hands,
Yes, I agree with you.
I always say that's who I want to be, you know, and my in-laws had that relationship. My mother-in-law just passed this year. But my in-laws have been holding hands, you know, actually they met as we did. We met when we were 17, and my in-laws met when they were even younger, and they were holding hands for all those decades.
I remember my mom and dad doing that too. My mom was in high school, and they met and drove across country, and they would always hold hands, dance in the kitchen, sing to each other, and it was it was a model for just romance and what they would do with each other. We had 5 kids, so it was busy. Don't get me
Yes,
wrong, it was
sure.
busy. But we knew that they were always in touch with each other.
That's so great. That's so great that you had that role model, because that also really helps a marriage. You know, I remember when we were living in the same town as my in-laws, I would love to be with them, because even if we were having a moment, going over there and being with them, as you said, it was a model for us. It was an environment for us to be our best selves. And so that brings me to another point, which is sometimes we don't live near family, or sometimes families are not the best role models. So it's important that you find friends who can support your marriage. You know, I've always believed that the marriage ceremony, people ask me, is there a difference between living together a long time and getting married? Yeah, there is. There are many differences. And one of the differences is that when you invite people to a public forum to witness the coming together of these two people, I believe that it's a responsibility to be in the crowd. I believe that when you are a witness to somebody else's marriage vows, that you have kind of a responsibility to support that marriage. I believe as a guest at a wedding, that's your responsibility, not just to eat the hors d'oeuvres, but you really have a responsibility there to support the marriage. And so I think that people tend to gravitate toward other friends' marriages that will support theirs. And I think that's very, very important. It's not a coincidence that we hang out with couples who really love each other. And I think that that helps us. It helps us to be our best selves. The other thing about remembering why you're there is that there are communication skills that we've learned, that we know about, that we use on others, that we sometimes forget to employ in our marriages. So for instance, we have a tape that's going on in our heads all day long that includes sometimes only us, and sometimes includes the people with whom we live, and especially our spouse. So for instance, we have a tape of an argument that we've had for years. All of us do. And that argument or discord or disagreement comes in different forms. It may be about different things, but the process of the argument is the same. And so sometimes I say to couples, if you're about to have the argument, the discussion that you have that gets you in trouble, why not say to each other, you know what, we know what's coming, right? We know what's going to happen. Let's just roll the tape and get to the end. And just say, tape number 1, done. Because do we really need to argue about that same thing over and over? And one of the things that prompts us to do that is not just that we feel we haven't finished it, even though we've had the same discussion and it's ended the same way forever, but sometimes we bring the past into now. And when we do that, so for instance, when we say, you did that before, I told you not to do that again. And I'm guilty of it too. I told you, please don't open all the cabinet doors at once. I'm afraid one is going to bump into another, and they were just painted. Okay. And sometimes I don't say it that nicely.
Really?
and just because I wanted to have an example, I'm going to tell you that I don't always say it nicely. And so when I don't, instead of thinking, we're here right now, this cabinet door just opened up just now, I don't really need to bring in that it was done yesterday. That's really irrelevant to this conversation. And when we bring in what I call the great guns, like when we start saying, you did it before, I told you before, or even worse, and everybody thinks that. Now you're bringing in company, you know, you're bringing in other people, your army. And really, this is just between you and them. This isn't between your army. They have nothing to do with this. And what happened yesterday has nothing to do with it. And you know what's really, really exciting? When not only can you forget about yesterday, but forget about 5 minutes ago. It can always be a new discussion, a new moment. And when anybody begins new, you don't have the same frustration, the same ammunition as you do if you're talking about the last 20 years. You know, I have a friend who's very funny, and she says to me, they both just retired, and I said, how's it going? And she said, it's going fine. She said, we only have one argument a day. And I said, really? That's pretty good. And she said, well, that one argument lasts all day. I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, morning till night, yeah.
She was joking.
Yeah.
But the thing is that it's okay to kind of let the past go, because when you don't, I can tell you for sure, When you don't let the past go, it's the best predictor of what's going to happen now. And if it didn't work out so well before, it ain't going to work out so well now.
I agree with you. That is so important to start again. And I think the message here is no matter how long you've been married, if it's been 20 years or 40 years, or like the couple in their 90s are celebrating a 50-year anniversary, you can make it new every single day.
Yes.
And you don't have to just go into the, oh, we're just buddies now, or we're just friends now. No, you're
Yes.
still intimate partners.
Yes. And here's what I think is the difficult part. We all want to do that, and we all say yes to that. But what's difficult is we really get into all of the other roles that we have. And some of those roles are hard. You know, we have hard jobs. Some of us have hard jobs. I don't. But some, I have an easy job. I have a fun job. But some people have very difficult jobs that they don't like. And so they bring that kind of, that disappointment, that anger sometimes, that frustration home. Sometimes, you know, people are home all day with infants or they're, you know, there's lots of other things going on. And so what happens is when we meet our spouse at the end of the day or when we see them, we bring all that with us. And what's hard is, what the difficult part is, when can we, and if so, how can we let those things drop when we come together? Can we make this us? This union of us, this twosome that we have, can we make this our little cozy spot? Can we make our relationship our haven?
And that sounds beautiful and amazing. I'm curious though how you feel about, you know, it's illness and sickness. It's hard. It's hard especially if you're in a long-term relationship and one partner is now the caregiver for the other one, and how to keep that spark alive and love alive when you're tired.
You're tired and you're exhausted, exactly. And that's so important to bring up, because that does happen as we age, and we're not always. And I'm
not talking about regular aches and pains.
Yes,
you know,
no.
as I complain about more and more aches and pains.
Me too. But yes, no, we're talking about what happens when one person is an actual caregiver. I think it's so important, especially then, to remember why you came, to remember why you're there, and also give yourself a tremendous amount of credit for the fact that not everybody chooses to do it. I know of situations where they say they married for better or worse, but they didn't, and the spouse left, or the spouse checked out emotionally, and that's not the same thing as getting some help, because when you are the primary caretaker, I'm all for trying to elicit some other people to help you, some other group of people to help you, whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's an agency. There's one agency I know where they provide not necessarily nursing care, but it's called Comfort Keepers, and I'm not sure, it was in a different city, I'm not sure if it's here. But there are some similar to Comfort Keepers here, I'm sure. And what they are agencies that provide companions. And that's so important to the caregiver. It's also important to the caregiver to take some time away.
And I think that is so important. I remember my mom had to do that when my dad was ill. But let's take that off the table. Let's say there's not a serious illness of a caregiver, and you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and you're both reasonably healthy, but you want to kind of keep the spark alive in the marriage. All right, Susan, get us to the facts here.
There we go.
What do we do?
So number one, sleep in the same bed. Number two, deliberately initiate physical touch, holding hands, giving hugs, giving back rubs, giving foot rubs. There's a lot of foot rubs in my house going on right now because our feet are killing us at the end of the day of these unpacking the boxes after having moved. So ways to connect physically. I don't know if that was number one or number two. That was I think 1 and 2. Number 3, create an environment for the two of you that doesn't include anybody else at least once a week. So it can be in a restaurant, it can be in your kitchen, it can be anywhere in your house, it can be taking a walk. It doesn't need to be a fancy dinner out. But when you change your environment And when you get out of your normal environment, that helps also. So it could be even a walk around the park. Change the environment, and also change the fact that you're coming from all of these other arenas, work, other people in your lives, all the sometimes you're taking care of your own adult parents. Change the environment and change the mood by just being together, the two of you, and starting out with how are you. And then think of creative things to do that you've never done before. And some people say, oh, come on, Susan, we've been married 40 years, 50 years. There's nothing we haven't done. Yes, there is. We moved to a new city. There's a whole bunch of things that we haven't done here. We may have done them in other places, but we haven't done them here. There's always something new to discover. There's always something new to find. Maybe there's an antique shop that you've never been to. Maybe you never liked antiques before, but maybe right now you're in the mood to go, and even if you're not, if your spouse is in the mood to go see one, go do that. We just, since we've been in Roanoke, we have been kayaking. I never was a kayaker before.
Is that working out for you?
It worked out very well. I loved it.
Good.
I absolutely loved it. And I didn't necessarily think I would. It just wasn't me before, but it is me here. This is what there is to do here. It's wonderful.
You know what I'm thinking about when you said find something new? Sometimes we can discover new things about our partner decades later that we didn't know if we take the time to really get to know them. And then also you said something earlier about how in the beginning of a relationship we're kinder and gentler. So I'm thinking speaking tenderly as a way to get back. It might be something too that you can try.
You know, I want people to keep in mind that the best responses from your partner come when you are willing to be committed to playing a role that is the highest form of yourself. Don't focus on why'd you leave the socks in the middle of the floor. You could pick up the socks and that's over in a second. Focus on how do I want to behave? What's the best role that I can play? How can I be the best version of myself? And you know when the best time to ask yourself that is? When you're not being the best version of yourself. When you really feel like you've let yourself down or you've let your partner down, and it happens to all of us all the time. So I'm not asking anybody to be perfect. I'm saying remember. Rose asked, how can we make this really great? How can we make long-term marriage great? By remembering to get back on track, by remembering why we're here, by remembering all the wonderful reasons why you married them in the first place. And you can get back there if you're not trying to instead bring up yesterday, bring up the past of things that you didn't like. Fresh start. You know, my parents used to always say, don't go to bed angry. And people think that that's kind of a saying that, you know, that may or may not be important. But my version of that is a little different. It's not necessarily not going to bed angry. It's try and start every moment fresh. Try and not bring, when you're in a long-term relationship, we know each other's nuances. We know what irks each other. We know where we've been. Even when we've been in a not-so-great place an hour before, you can start again. Every moment is a new opportunity to start again. And the other thing that I want to mention about long-term marriage is that sometimes people bring their previous marriages into long-term marriage. Or if you've had a long-term marriage and now you're in a new marriage, you bring the things that went wrong. As soon as somebody does anything that is remotely the same as the family of origin that you were raised in or your previous relationship, all of a sudden it's like a tape that's still playing in your head. You're reacting as though you're still in that relationship that you're not in now. So if you can apply that to the long-term marriage, you're really not in the same relationship that you were 40 years ago.
No, that makes sense too, because it is a brand new relationship and it's a brand new day. And even if you don't feel like you have to revive something that's lost, maybe you're just maintaining. Maybe you have this great synergy with your spouse, your partner, and you're just trying to maintain to keep the love alive in a long-term relationship.
And you know what, that's so important, Rose, and that reminds me of something else that I want to end on too, is that one of the best ways you can be a fabulous partner is to be one with yourself, to be happy with yourself. Because if you're in a good place with yourself, then you have things to offer in the conversation. instead of complaining, instead of being miserable, instead of kind of the things over the course of time that some people get themselves into, which is that tape that they play, that's not the happy tape. So instead, if you can also make yourself someone who is becoming, somebody who is finding new interests, somebody who has things to talk about that maybe you weren't involved in before. Now, if you can talk about those things that you're invested in that you weren't before, that also brings to the table, to the long-term marriage, an entirely different discussion that you haven't had before.
I love that. So there's ways that we can not only keep it alive, there's ways we can recoup, there's things we can find out about ourselves that might be different, and there's ways that we can not only nurture our partner, but speak tenderly and make sure that anything that was a conflict, we have ways to get over it again, right?
Yes.
So the final message is, no matter what long-term relationship that you find yourself in, what long-term marriage, at 20, 30, 40, 50 years, 70 years, it's always can be new and fresh, and there's always hope for the next tomorrow of that relationship growing and staying good. I love that, Susan.
And we're 42. How many years have you been married?
22.
There you go.
There we go. Thanks, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. It was Susan, and I can't wait to see you next time. Bye-bye.